Welcome back to the Dispute.a podcast. I'm Paul, and this is episode 9. Whether a dispute settles in the pre-legal space or proceeds to a tribunal, the outcome rests on the same foundation: the evidence. Your position is only as strong as what you can actually demonstrate. This episode is about what evidence genuinely matters in a developer dispute, what doesn't, and what you should be preserving from the very start.
The principle, a dispute, is decided on the record, not the memory. Starts with the principle that reframes everything. A buyer experiences a dispute as a story, a sequence of events, conversations, promises, frustrations that they remember and feel. The story is vivid to them. A dispute is not decided on the story. It's decided on the record, on the documents, the dated communications, the contractual provisions, the demonstrable facts. The parts of the buyer's story that exist in the record carry weight. The parts that exist only in the buyer's memory, the verbal promise, the reassuring phone call, the thing the sales agent said, carry very little. This gap between the story a buyer remembers and the record a buyer can produce is where a lot of disputes are lost, not because the buyer was wrong about what happened, because the buyer couldn't demonstrate it. So the discipline from the very start of any dispute, ideally from the start of the purchase itself, is to convert the story into the record. What counts as strong evidence? Let's be specific about what carries weight. Contract itself is the foundational document, the SPA, its schedules, its annexes, its payment plan. Everything in a dispute is read against the contract first. The payment record, proof of what was paid when to whom and into which account. Bank transfer records, escrow account, confirmations, receipts. The payment record is often decisive. Dated written communications. Emails, official letters, formal notices, written messages through documented channels. Dated written communication is strong because it's hard to dispute. Official records. The project's registration status, RERA's records. The interim register entry. Any formal regulatory action on the project. These are independent and authoritative. Formal notices. Notices served under the contract or under the legislation. The service of a formal notice, properly documented, is a hard fact in the record. Photographic and inspection evidence, where relevant, for disputes. Involving the condition or progress of construction, dated. Photographs and any formal inspection reports can matter. What counts as weak evidence? And now what carries little weight, however true it may be, verbal promises. The thing the sales agent said, the reassurance on the phone. These may be entirely real, but in a dispute, an undocumented verbal promise is very hard to rely on. Memory and recollection. I'm certain they told me. Memory is not. Evidence. Marketing materials sometimes. Brochures occupy a complicated space. Often they carry less weight than buyers expect because contracts typically contain provisions about what the buyer is and isn't relying on informal messages sometimes. A screenshot of part of a conversation is weaker than a complete, contemporaneous, documented exchange. The general sense of unfairness. The feeling that the developer behaved badly. The dispute turns on demonstrable breach of demonstrable obligations, not on the general texture of the developer's conduct. The asymmetry of evidence. Here's an uncomfortable structural point. The developer usually has better evidence than the buyer. The developer's contracts, team documents, systematically. They keep complete records. They serve formal notices and keep proof of service. They maintain the payment ledgers. The individual buyer usually doesn't. The buyer's record is typically partial, scattered, and assembled in a hurry once the dispute is already underway. This asymmetry has a direct implication. The buyer who wants a strong position has to close the evidence gap deliberately, because it won't close itself. What to preserve, and from when? Evidence preservation should start at the beginning of the purchase, not the beginning of the dispute. From the start of a purchase, the buyer should keep the complete, signed contract with every annex and schedule. Every payment record as each payment is made. Every piece of written communication with the developer, organized by date, every formal notice sent or received, and the project's registration details. From the start of a dispute, if that preservation wasn't done from the beginning, the buyer should reconstruct as much of that record as possible. And from that point forward, document everything, every communication in writing, every call followed up with a written summary. The shift a buyer has to make once a dispute is live is from informal to formal. Stop having undocumented phone calls. Move the dispute into writing. How evidence shapes the pre-legal strategy. Evidence isn't only for the courtroom, it shapes the entire pre-legal strategy. A buyer with a strong documentary record negotiates from strength in the pre-legal space. The developer's contracts team can see that the record supports the buyer. That visible strength is leverage. A buyer with a weak or scattered record negotiates from weakness, even if their underlying story is true. So one of the first things a structured pre-legal process does is assess the evidence honestly. What can actually be demonstrated? That assessment determines the realistic position, which determines the strategy, and sometimes the evidence assessment is the moment of honest news. The moment a buyer learns that the thing they're most relying on is the thing they can least demonstrate. Better to learn that early from your own side than late from the counterparties. A dispute is decided on the record, not the memory. The work is converting the story you remember into the record you can produce, and the time to start is before the dispute, not during it. What to take from this episode? A dispute is decided on the documentary record, not on the buyer's memory of events. Strong evidence, the contract and its annexes, the payment record. Dated written communications, official and regulatory records. Formal notices, weak evidence, verbal promises, memory, much marketing material. Partial informal messages, the general sense of unfairness. The developer usually has the better documentary record. Closing. That gap is the buyer's deliberate task. Evidence preservation should start at the beginning of the purchase. If it didn't, it should start the moment the dispute becomes live. Evidence shapes the whole pre-legal strategy, not just litigation. A structured process audits the evidence honestly before building a strategy. In the final episode of this series, we look at the real cost of going legal versus settling. Thanks for listening. The full transcript is at transcript.a. For pre-legal dispute support, dispute.a is where that work is done.